Welcome to the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman, and with me, as always, or usually I should say, is Chris Clown. Today, we're going to be talking about one of our favorite things in comic books, I would say, which is the classic major comic book staple of mainstream comic book staple, I should say, of the one and done issue for superhero comic books. And this is a good conversation, to be honest, because I think it talks about the medium in different ways and lots of exciting stuff in the meantime. But before we get into it, as always, I'd really appreciate it if you went and all just hit that subscribe button. Just makes it all much easier for us, and go ahead and interact with everything, like, hit the like button, and leave a comment, like all that jazz. So go ahead and do all that. Really appreciate it. And yeah, so without further ado, we'll just hop on this. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. Before we get into this, I want to show you something. I got this today. I'm gonna blow myself up here. Let me turn the music down a little bit here.
Don't blow yourself up too bad.
Have you? I'm assuming you're getting this.
Yes, it's on my radar. I haven't picked it up yet, but I'm definitely getting it.
Have you even looked through this book?
No.
Goddamn. Goddamn. Like, I mean, Jurgens is great. It was funny because I thought he was drawing it too for some reason, and I looked through this at first and I went, this isn't Jurgens. And I went, oh, wait a minute. Mike Perkins? Like, he did that Ram V Swamp Thing run.
Yeah.
And which I need to finish and I like, but holy smokes, just looking through this thing is just gorgeous. Like, DC is just, we'll be talking about this sometime soon, people.
It's fine with me. I mean, that's such an untapped era to revive that as soon as I heard about the concept, I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely something that needs to be handled, like the quasi golden, like something akin to a life story for Batman. And obviously it's not the same, but acknowledging the golden age, especially since those stories are going to be in the public domain pretty soon, or at least Detective 27 is you're going to have to find a way to differentiate, To be quite honest, you have to explain to me the whole that whole thing, the whole public domain thing. I still get confused by it. So no, it's very simple. After 100 years, a story that is, a copyrighted work that was established a century earlier enters the public domain. So we just saw it with Mickey Mouse, his first appearance in the Steamboat Willie animated film that Walt Disney created. The very first appearance is now in the public domain, so people can do with it what they want. But additional derivations, so like a modern version of Mickey Mouse in like the red overalls and with his eyes looking more like people's eyes, none of those derivations are in the public domain, just the first appearance. So when Action number 1 hits the public domain, it's very conceivable that Marvel could publish a Superman story based on how Superman was in 1938 in that very first story. And the same when Detective 27 goes into the public domain. So what DC is going to have to do, I can't remember where I read it, but I read an article recently where it was like, the best way for the publishers to guard against that is to have better quality control for your stories, because you're going to have a crap load of knockoff Batman and Superman stories. So you need to make clear that DC is the place to go for real Batman stories or real Superman stories. It'll be a really interesting development to see unfold.
Yeah, that is interesting. That is interesting. So, really quick here, Andrew, I want to comment on this because I don't know. I've only read Gotham by Gaslight once, and it was not my favorite book, to be quite honest. But I might have to reread it. I don't know. The art obviously is good. Mike Malinga is he's the GOAT or one of the GOATs, you could say. But I don't know. We'll have to talk about that eventually. Yeah, I don't think DC will be able to protect Batman from anything. To be quite honest, from that, from what it sounds like. So
well, no, it's not a matter of protect. Like they're not going to be able to stop it. You're going to have knockoff shitty horror movies that have a golden age Batman with purple gloves killing people, just like you're seeing with Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse now. So what they have to do is make clear to audiences that if you want quality Batman stories, you need to read a DC book. Especially like golden age ones. This might be kind of a response to that, and more power to them. That this book by Jurgens can show, hey, this is what we can do with Batman. So right. They can try, but the buck stops with us. We'll see.
That is very interesting. That is very, very interesting. So, anyway, so today we're going to be talking about, and this is kind of, to me, this is Chris's great idea. Hey, listen, it's been a while, but I didn't love it when I read it the first time, but I'll give it another chance. But today we're going to be talking about, modern comics, or the big two, what they've obviously pushed forward with early in their their infancy, and their, for the golden age, the silver age, and to the bronze age. And it's become less and less frequent, which is the 20 to 22 page standalone story. Right now, writers all mostly write for the trade. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I want to make that very clear. I don't think the trade is a bad thing to aim for. The problem is that, and I've said this in the notes here in the description, is that the beauty of the 22 page comic book, or 20 to 22 page comic book standalone issue, is that when you're dealing with superheroes, and you kind of force the writer kind of forces themselves to really put themselves and the character in a situation that really highlights the characterization of the hero or the villain, if you will. But someone in the story is a character aspect is going to be highlighted. And it's very important that I think that we recognize that when you're doing a trade, writing for the trade only, you have a means to an end. And sometimes you're either decompressing or you're compressing, which can be a flaw either way. And so it's interesting because, when we think about the standalone issues, when I was going through my rereading of Amazing Spider-Man, or reading for the first time chronologically, it's interesting because some of those standalone issues are so important for these characters' growth, or, you could argue if it's growth or not, but these, at least what I like to say, is deepen what we love about the character or characters, right? And I think the standalone issue it's not, as you'll see today, it's not gone away completely, but it's not as frequent as we want. And we'll talk about that today. So Chris, what was your kind of inspiration for this idea for the show today?
A couple of different things. One, you said, crap, what are we going to do?
You can't admit this to people. We gotta pretend we already know what we're doing.
Look, anyway, I think that
continue. It's fine.
Look, as someone who works in a deadline-driven environment for my job, look, man, this is my bread and butter. I gotta come up with things quickly on the fly because you gotta feed the beast. But the beautiful part of comics is that there's just such a rich tapestry. Yes, I like Gotham by Gaslight, by the way. It's just such a rich tapestry of different topics, and I've always appreciated done in ones so much. Especially like when I was a retailer and keeping up with all of the competing narratives across dozens of different books at any given time. That can be a challenge, especially if, in our situation, I don't know if people would really know this. I mean, I've talked about being a retailer enough in my life probably, but in a college town, where it's a little bit of a revolving door in terms of new customers coming in the form of new students that were going to the school in the town that I was in. You needed to be able to have refreshed conversations with these people to get them invested in the stories. If they were longtime fans that maybe came from their own local comic shop and were just picking things back up, that's one thing. If you are someone who is open to the idea of beginning to read comics, best thing to put in their hands is a done in one. And a good done in one makes a lifelong fan. That's been my observation. So, coming with the necessity to have something, good to talk about on the fly, let's give some love to done in ones. That was the basic inspiration for the idea. It's just it is becoming less common, which is unfortunate. But some of my favorite ongoing runs are just made up of done in ones. We talked back when this was a podcast about Paul Dini's run on Detective Comics, and that was almost entirely done in ones for like the first 2.5 years that he was on that book, and they were excellent. But then, if just like a good solid done in one comes around, which mostly seems to be created out of necessity to make sure that there's not going to be a lag in an ongoing book's publication schedule. Sometimes you can get something really special out of that, especially if it's a creative team that really knows what they're doing. So I just said, let's do that, and picked. I asked you if you were in the mood for either Superman or the Penguin, and you said Superman, hands down. So the book that I chose for you, I actually remember reading in a bookstore off of a magazine rack when I was a freshman in high school. It was long before I'd even jumped back into comics full time. It was a few years before Batman Begins came out, and I took the bus to the mall because I couldn't drive yet. Walked into the bookstore, looked at the graphic novels, and then saw this cover on a rack and decided to pick it up. I read it right there in the store, and I bought it and took it home. And that's the book that I gave you.
Well, yeah, no, I got it. You hear me? Sorry, I'm trying to get something fixed on here. I'm a little distracted. I apologize. So, yeah, I want to make it very clear. It's very interesting you brought up Paul Dini and his detective run, because you're right. That was a great run of just pure, like, fun issues one by one, and then they were connected loosely, but never, like, there was no ongoing narrative going on that you had to keep track of. And that's something that's been lost in the modern big two or big three or big four, if you will. It there, because the trade is so profitable. Again, this is, I don't begrudge anybody. The trade is such a valuable asset financially that it doesn't really behoove them to do a single issue by itself a bunch, right? It has to be a lot more methodical, which is kind of a bummer, but I totally get it. I totally get that. So, yeah. So do you want to talk about? So, are we talking about my issue or your issue? We're doing yours first or my first?
Well, I mean, you're reviewing mine and I'm reviewing yours. Which one do you think we should talk about?
We're going to talk about both.
Yeah, no, I know. But I mean, which one do you want to talk first about, the Superman issue, or do you want me to talk first about the Spider-Man issue?
Let's do let's see here. Let's talk about the Superman issue. I apologize. I got confused.
Okay, so
sorry. Oh yeah, I thought you were saying something. Sorry.
No, so I'll just as a preamble before you get started. So this is Action Comics number 791. It came out in the summer of 2002, I believe. So this was actually like right at the height of Smallville's popularity. This is before Smallville's second season had even premiered. So the idea and the concept of Smallville was kind of back in vogue among the Superman faithful and general audiences, since it was a pretty popular show when it came out. And the setup, it starts in the modern day, but it quickly delves into a flashback based on a moment of pain that Clark had endured as a young man going to Smallville High. one thing that I thought was fun, I went back and I reread the review that my friend Neil Bailey wrote for this issue for the Superman homepage way back when it came out. And he was like, "I'm so glad that they made it comic Smallville and not TV Smallville." Like, 'cause that was a thing, right? You know, like the other media wagging the dog. But I just thought it was a good, solid, done in one Smallville flashback story that you would appreciate for its poignance. So, take the floor, man.
Yeah. So when you brought up this whole thing, and I was like, man, like that's that it's interesting, you know, when you brought this up, because I'm like, yeah, it's an interesting idea, right? To like, when you give me a Superman comic, a one and done issue, it's like, hey, like maybe this is gonna be a whatever, right? And it's interesting because when I first started reading this, it starts off like I thought I knew where it was going. And I really appreciated the fact that it wasn't. And that was the cool thing about this issue, is that you we talked about it before. It really is about what makes Superman so great as a person, and Clark, and what his parents kind of instilled, those values instilled in him. And the fact that it still haunts him to this day, but also the fact that like you think you know where it's going and it doesn't. And I think that there's something even more powerful in there. And I don't want to spoil it for people. I want to make this very, very clear. I think this is definitely a comic worth reading, because I really think we talk about humanity in Superman. I think this is, to me, one of the better human aspects of Clark slash Superman, because you see him struggle, I think, as a teenager and as an adult, coping with the same thing. And I think that this, I know, like I like Smallville a lot, at least the early first 4 seasons. I haven't finished the series, but I liked Smallville a lot. I got really connected to Superman through Smallville. And I think that that's the thing about this that's so cool, is that if you like Smallville, like me, or at least the early seasons, this is very up that alley. And it really kind of, it's kind of a bummer they never went, at least as far as I know, Chris, they never really did an adaptation of this. And I was really impressed. It was a very good kind of a, without being over heavy handed, this is a very good issue to kind of really give you an idea of what Clark is like, and a kind of a cool like idea, or it's a good indication of why we need to be good to people, and not just because of like we don't want to be jerks, kind of. Does that make sense? Like, it's just, I don't know. Like I said, it really, I thought I knew where it was going, and then I'm like, oh God. So it was really good. I was really impressed. I'll be honest. I was really impressed. For a 22-page comic book, it goes through a lot. And that whole compression that we talk about, that I think the comic book medium really like flourishes in, it's on display here. And I think it's really great that it's a great issue to read. And I think if you struggle with, if you struggle with reading Superman as a whole, I think this issue is definitely worth picking up for that reason, for the reason of getting into Superman and really getting into the character.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in terms of like thinking that it's going to go one way before it goes another, I mean, the basic premise for this is that Clark decides to go to homecoming with someone who's not Lana. He arguably he might see the girl that he does end up asking to go to homecoming in a bit of a sympathetic light. But and I mean, he even says at one point, much to his chagrin, and he puts his foot in his mouth later, that that he's doing it to be nice. She overhears this and naturally is very hurt by that. But then, you think that she's going to do something drastic. It's not that at all. She's actually a very well-adjusted person. And Clark, I think, recognizes that. And then when they actually do go to the dance, they have a really nice time together. And it's conceivable to think, based on the way that the story is written and certainly the way that the artwork is laid out, that there's something that's like legitimate here. There's like a spark between these two kids. And it ends in a way that maybe you could expect, or maybe not. Maybe that was unexpected for you. But ultimately, it's a moment of pain, to the point where, when at the very beginning of the issue, where we start in the present day, Clark gets a letter that he opens it with his heat vision in the office, which maybe isn't a great idea, but he does that. And he wants his alma mater, Smallville High, wants him to be the master of ceremonies for the homecoming dance, a dance that was very painful for him for reasons that'll become obvious to anyone who reads the issue. And the only moments of action that we really get is one page where Superman is doing everything that he can to put this off. And until there is nothing left to do but acknowledge this. And who does he go to? Who's the only person he can really trust to maybe start to understand where he's coming from? It's his wife. Of course it's his wife. And there's a surprising level of dimension to all of the layers in this issue that I really appreciate. And this writer, Ben Robb, he has a decent bibliography over at DC, but I have not seen his name all that much. He would do a few issues of Green Arrow here. He would do a few issues of Kyle Rayner Green Lantern there. He actually had a decent, like a 10-issue run, I think, on Green Lantern before Judd Winnick jumped on board, I think. And then, this Action Comics issue is the only one that he did. I don't think it doesn't look like he did any actual dedicated Superman stuff. He did, he has a couple of credits on the Flash TV show. He did a couple of issues of Wonder Woman, but not a very extensive bibliography in terms of his comics writing, or at least at DC. That's what I looked up. But I mean, he clearly gets where Clark is coming from, and getting a look at him from this point in his life, it's a rare treat, especially during this time. This was like in the aftermath of our worlds at war. You can see in the moment here that he's still got the black background to the symbol, as because it's representative of him being in mourning over all of the lives lost in the Imperiex War. So it's a pretty tumultuous moment in Superman's publication history. So the ability to kind of take a breather and to go back and see this formative moment for him, breath of fresh air. And I think it's a good, solid done in one.
It was funny because when I saw the writer, I'm like, I've never heard of this guy.
Yeah.
Ever. And then as I'm looking through reading the comic book, I'm like, this is really, really good. Like what's going on here? And sure enough, like, I'm like, you're right. Like, I'm like, man, like this is the kind of stuff that we need to pepper into our trades or into our ongoing narratives of like gang war we just got, in Spider-Man. And I think it would have benefited greatly by an issue like this, maybe of, let's say, Peter Parker, kind of remorsing over Randy, and then having to, like, you can intersplice that whole conversation, thing with him and with Spider-Man and Peter fighting the gang war and going, and having like a very focused issue that's not just about the whole narrative, trying to drive the narrative, right? Because we have to remember when we're dealing with at least superhero comic books, we want it for the hero. And I think it's good. It's always a good reminder of why we love the hero. And I think in putting them in a situation like Clark here, as an example. So, if you don't mind talking just kind of end this, I have to be right back, Chris. So just go ahead and kind of go ahead and wrap it up here, or whatever you need to do. I'll be right back.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think this issue speaks to is the kind of what you mentioned. It's just superhero storytelling. Yeah, we love the trappings of superhero storytelling. We love when really powerful people knock down with, or throw down, I should say, with really powerful villains, these kinds of world-shattering stakes, especially, I mean, Superman can run the gamut from these kind of intimate conflicts with members of his rogues gallery up through like the most cosmic kinds of antagonists you can imagine. Whether it's someone like Darkseid or the Anti-Monitor or Perpetua in Dark Knight's Metal, or Death Metal, I should say. Superman runs that whole gamut. But one of the unique things about Superman to me is the fact that he comes from very humble beginnings. His beginnings are a total mismatch for his power level, but he learned the importance of good character and different kinds of metaphysical strength from the guiding hands of his parents in a nurturing environment. But he still has to confront all of the same kinds of challenges that any young person who is coming of age has to confront themselves. So when you put that through kind of a Superman lens and you arrive at some of the stories that have taken place during his time in Smallville, there's some really potent creative territory. And you have so many people who try to dismiss Superman by saying he's too powerful, it's impossible to relate to him. Well, they've certain people who've said that almost in every case, 99.999% of cases have not read this book. And if they have, or if they had, then maybe they would feel a little bit differently about the ability to connect with Superman, because his only weaknesses are not kryptonite and magic. He has a beating heart just like the rest of us, and it's on full display in this issue.
Yeah, that's really well said. And again, I really want to stress that this issue is a great, great example of, for people who say Superman's boring, he's not interesting. To me, this was an interesting story, and I think it really shows you the bleeding heart aspect is just so undervalued in Superman. And I think, someone like a writer like James Gunn, who's going to be obviously directing and writing the new Superman movie, I think he gets this. If Guardians is any indication of how he gets these characters, is that he understands these aspects so well. And I'm very excited to see what James could do. And I think, if you're wanting to know a good like Smallville story, again, if you love Smallville TV show, Action 791, go on to DC Infinite, whatever, go on there. It's on there. Read it.
The only other place that you can read it besides hunting down the original issue, by the way.
That's crazy. That's crazy, yo. And I also think it's funny how Zach, if he's still here, he comes in right before we do Spider-Man. He knows I don't want to do Superman. I'm waiting for Spider-Man. I didn't even tell him. He just knew. So Zach, if you're still watching, which by the way, I'm gonna call Zach out right now really quick. Chris, he was like, my favorite Spider-Man writers. You got classics. You got the J and D Mateus. You got Peter David. It's like okay, whatever. Stan Lee, I think he put in there, and then he's like, I forgot the other people he put in there. Then he's like, oh yeah, an honorable mention, Jerry Conway. I was like, what? Honorable mention. Oh yeah, like the guy who's like arguably the reason the Spider-Man is who he is. Oh yeah, that guy gets an honorable mention. You're insane, Zach. You're insane. You're an animal. All right, so are we ready to move on to my issue?
Okay.
All right. So, and I just want to stress right now how rad this idea was, because you had talked to me about this idea a while ago, and I thought it was a really cool idea. And I think that there's so much value in this. And I remember, we talked about, when you asked or you told me about this, I'm like, I was kind of struggling. I'm like, what am I going to do? And the first thing that came up to me is the kid who collected Spider-Man, which is that's like the staple, go-to for any Spider-Man standalone story, is the kid who collected Spider-Man, right? Are you? And I almost got it, because I don't think you've read that or are familiar with that. Are you at all, Chris?
No.
Yeah, and there's a reason why I didn't do that, because we're gonna save it for the council one day. So,
gotcha.
Yeah, and it is a classic comic book, but it's interesting because Tom DeFalco, who wrote that issue with Ron Frenz, two I think underappreciated legends, Tom DeFalco, who used to be the editor-in-chief of Marvel, and I forgot where I was reading this or heard it from, But Tom DeFalco was very big on, and I think Jim Shooter did this too. They stockpiled these kinds of issues. So what they would do is they'd pay a writer and pay an artist, right? And they'd get the comic done, put it in the drawer, and has a backup in case there was someone who's late and they needed to have a fill-in issue. And this is what they would do. Tom DeFalco was the king at this. And they don't do it anymore, which is, I think, which as far as I know, maybe they still do, but it's, you know, like we said, it doesn't seem like that's the case. Now, I just love that idea. Just having random, and if you read the run of Spider-Man, and like over the years, which I have, and I'm right now in the early 90s, you could totally tell when those issues happen because they're all over Spider-Man. And I'm sure they're all over every other comic out there as well. But man, there's some doozies in there that are writers you have never listened to. Yeah, I'll listen here, sir. Look, that guy Jerry Conway. He's an honorable mention. Honorable mention. Stan Lee. Yeah, he wrote Spider-Man for a while, but he didn't really do much with the character until Jerry Conway came in and you probably put Roy Thomas in there too, right? I'm just kidding. I'm just giving Zach a hard time. Anyway, so we're going to talk about The Kid Who Collected Spider-Man, which I think is a classic issue. Which it feels like outside of Spider-Man fans, not a lot of people talk about that issue. And it's kind of weird. It's kind of, yeah, exactly. It's kind of weird. So when you brought this up to me, I started thinking, like, it's hard to, put me on the spot. I'm like, okay, I got to think of something cool. And this cover came right to me. And I remember I talked about this, I think with people on the council, and this was a recent issue. Ironically, we talk about, there's a little bit of tie-ins with current continuity, which I don't think really matters necessarily, because you could argue that the issue you chose was also the same thing, right, Chris? Like, Clark and Lois are married, but that doesn't matter. Like that, because the one and done issue has to be anyone can read this comic book and get something out of it. And this was written a couple years ago by Tom Taylor, who's a very prolific writer in comic books, very much known for mainly, I think, for his DC work. And this was coming out in conjunction with oh my gosh, Nick Spencer's Spider-Man, and also having it with I believe Zdarsky. So you had Nick Spencer, Zdarsky, and Tom Taylor. Pretty much, Nick Spencer's kind of gone, away a little bit, which is kind of a bummer. Roger Stern didn't. Well, he was the editor, but was he who wrote the issue? Was it all friends? Oh, okay. Right. See, this is why I have this. I thought I could have sworn DeFalco wrote it, but anyway. Yes, exactly. So this comic book, when you talked about a great standalone issue, this thing came right to mind. And the reason I chose it, because obviously you get this a beautiful cover, right? And I talk about, give me a cover that tells me what the comic book is about, but also is selling the comic book. You couldn't do this any better than this right here. This is a slam dunk, grand slam. This is a 60-yard throw, touchdown, that is wide open, and the quarterback hits him in stride. I mean, this is it right here, because yes, it's somewhat misleading because, spoiler alert, Mary Jane doesn't don the costume, but figuratively, she does what Spider-Man does in this comic book, and I'll leave it there. She teams up with a Spider-Man character, leave it there as well. But to me, Tom Taylor does a great job of nailing the characterization and the strong personality and character of Mary Jane Watson. And I think she's definitely developed over the years. She's never stand pat. She's definitely grown, I would say, and changed a little bit. I'd say changed loosely, but she's gotten to a point where she's not the damsel in distress. We all know that. That's very obvious. But Mary Jane's always been a very strong like character emotionally, and is externally has to be the anchor for her family. But I think not just for her family, which we got a lot of that in the 90s and the 80s, but she becomes the anchor for Peter. And Chris, I don't know about you, and people who are watching this, let me know. Um, I I think that this comic book, you could read this and never know they were not married. You would assume they were married by this point. Like if you just read this comic book and you just read this, you would think that these people are soulmates and they're probably married. And you're telling me people can't write a good Mary Jane Watson and Peter being married? This is it. This is the perfect example of two people in a strong relationship, of someone who is the anchor and the pillar for them. And that's what Mary Jane is. She was that for her family growing up, and now she's like that for Peter here. Not necessarily right now because Zeb Wells Run, but that's a whole different podcast. But I'll throw it to you here in a second, Chris. I thought this comic book was exceptional, and I loved. Again, I don't want to tease it. I want to tease it or spoil it, but I'll tease it. There's a great team up here, which I just adored. I thought it was handled beautifully, and yeah, I can't say enough. I'm not. I mean, I haven't read enough of Tom Taylor to say that I love or think he's whatever, or what. But I will say his Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man run has some like good issues. To me, this is the best one. I know that people will go to the Spider Bite. To me, that's low hanging fruit. It's a very emotional story. It's very and I think it's good. But to me, this is the best Spider-Man comic he's written in my opinion. So, Chris, what's your take on this comic?
I think the first thing that surprised me was just how much each of our picks, which were not made in concert with each other at all.
They were not at all.
They kind of rhyme,
Totally. Yeah.
I think one of the things that came to mind was just like this feels kind of like a modern evolution of the book that I picked, which is now over 20 years old, which is, I mean, that's how 22 years old this coming summer. The key difference, of course, is that, in the action issue, Lois is a necessary figure to get Superman to a point of realization about this moment of pain that he went through. Whereas with this one, Mary Jane is front and center as the person who is willing to carry a little bit of Peter's load while he is recuperating from what he's recuperating from, if we're going to keep details light. So that was something that I was kind of surprised by, pleasantly so, but I was like, wow, our heads are in the same place. That's interesting to me. But actually reading the issue, no, I was totally on board. I mean, as someone who is several years behind on Amazing in particular, I
for the record, you're several years behind on everything.
Yes, that's true, but I mean, I'm less behind on Amazing than I am other stuff. It was like, the middle of Spencer's run, I think, is when I checked out. And it's not that I wasn't enjoying it. It was just like moving back here derailed my regular reading experience. But beyond that, I mean, I have picked up bits and pieces from you and from other people in our orbit about some of the places that Spencer's run goes, especially when it comes to addressing like One More Day in particular. And as someone who has consistently been against the dissolution of the key superhero marriages, this was you're right. I mean, if you weren't totally up to date with the fact that One More Day happened and that the marriage has yet to be fully repaired, then it does feel like a story of soulmates. So I think that it carries a really understandable perspective to come from by showing exactly why Mary Jane and Peter work as well together as they do. not just as romantic partners, but also as people who have a similar worldview and a similar sense of responsibility. Even if Mary Jane can't take it as far as Peter does, that's just mostly because she physically can't. She was not bitten by the spider. She is just as exceptional a person, arguably, as Peter is, which is why they're drawn together. I'm really happy to see that emphasized between the two of them, because as someone who generally enjoyed what followed One More Day, um, I had always felt that sense of longing that Mephisto seemed to indicate he would relish in during One More Day, right? Like this sense of longing that you don't totally know what you've lost, but you've lost something. Well, I know what I lost. I lost the marriage between Peter and Mary Jane. But in this issue, by putting their relationship front and center and by allowing them to show why it's not just a typical relationship. It is rather a symbiotic kind of being between the two of them. I was really happy to see that. And, the sense of leadership that she exhibits when she's under pressure is something that definitely comes through. And her ability to delegate in a high pressure situation. You mentioned the fact that she's not a damsel anymore, and she literally says that in the story, which I think is a good touch to have, because for those people who may not have picked up an issue of Amazing or any of the other Spidey monthlies in the intervening 15 or 20 years, you're going to get a pretty good crash course in what modern Mary Jane can do.
Yeah.
Back on we did a Comics on you and I did a Comics on Consoles backup issue about the first Insomniac Spider-Man game. And one of the contentions that I made there was that I was really pleased that they gave Mary Jane an additional function that was beyond some of the, I mean, 25 different jobs that she's had in the comics over the years. They made her a reporter because in that game, she kind of explained that she felt some of Peter's sense of responsibility kind of rubbed off on her, and she wanted to do what she could, and in sort of contributing to the same kind of mission, but in a different way. And in that game, the way that they chose to have her do that was as a reporter for the Daily Bugle. And here, I feel like the characterization is stronger in terms of emphasizing why she is so, like, even if she doesn't necessarily fit into the box of a function or a particular job, it's kind of a good thing, especially in this case, because she's kind of a jack of all trades. Being around someone as brilliant as Peter Parker, alongside her own sense of tenacious, pursuit, it translates into someone who is it's the old adage of not all heroes wear masks. Mary Jane Watson absolutely has the heart of a hero in the Marvel Comics universe, and this issue does a very good job of emphasizing that.
I want to make this very clear, Andrew, because I think that what I agree with you. I think these are all traits, the party girl and the actress. The thing about MJ is she's so independent. And if you read those early issues with, again, the GOAT, Gary Conway, Zach, he really emphasized Mary Jane being a leader and kind of doing her own thing, to be quite honest. And I think what's really cool about that is that you see all those characteristics in this issue. She's a leader. She doesn't wait to do things herself. And that's one thing as a kid growing up, Mary Jane never seemed like she's just some dumb, just, bimbo, Mary Jane always was very like forward and very aggressive and it never seemed meek. She was probably one of the, besides Princess Leia, was probably the best, I'd say woman role model in my life growing up, because she was, even though she was drawn sexually so much by Eric Larson and Todd McFarlane, thankfully, we had Mark Bagley come in and be a little bit, easier, on that way. But either way, the characterization with David Michelinie always did a fantastic job of showing Mary Jane as someone who's very strong-willed, but she was always the to me the leader and always a good backbone for Peter. And I think that if you go back and read those original Conway issues, like when Gwen died and Peter's having a hard time, I loved the way the Conway wrote Mary Jane, and it's all here. I think you all see the progression, and to me, it just I always liked the party girl aspect was because she was trying to get away from her home life, one thing, but also she was the life of the party. She loved being the life of the party, and yes, there's a center of attention aspect, but when as someone who likes to be a center of attention a lot more than I like to admit, I like to say there's a leadership aspect there too, usually, not always, but to me, there is an aspect of Mary Jane there. And I think you see it front and center here, which I love. And I think that's why I didn't have a problem with her being Tony Stark's secretary, kind of like second in command, because there's that leadership, level that she has that I've always thought that was always great to have. She was written, and people who understood the character the best knew how to utilize that the best. So, Adam's on the, pizza time here is on the money. She is 1000%. He writes her better, I think, almost than anybody. So, to me, Mary Jane, Tom Taylor really got into what really the heart of the character here. And I think that this is where, again, I want to stress here, the team up they do in this comic book is so good. I love it. I think it's definitely a treat if you read the comic book, and it's on.
Well, part of that is because it's not like a direct team up as much as it's like, here's someone with a particular set of skills who's very good at heroing, and here is someone who can pick up the really critical other support that is necessary in this moment, that doesn't necessarily involve, having the proportionate strength of a what. So it's just like, it's a really good way to illustrate what she brings to the table beyond just the
Not
typical
you,
trappings. No, I know the typical trappings of superhero storytelling, but it doesn't betray the heroism that you want from superhero storytelling. It's not an action pack. I mean, this one has more action in it than the Superman issue does, but it's not, it's not Mary Jane kicking the crap out of people. It's something more. Yeah, and this moment here too, where she's helping Aunt May out with a very particular task related to an affliction that she has. Like, it's another just sweet, poignant moment that you hope the best of us exhibit under difficult circumstances. At the end of the day, what do you want? What more do you want from a hero? Not all heroes punch things in the face. Some heroes just make people's days a little bit more bearable. And that's what Mary Jane does in this, in addition to a lot of other exceptional things that she does here.
It's just funny because, they're trying to give her like these superpowers right now. And I think this issue is a great example of why you don't need, I mean, I know there's a narrative they're building for whatever reason they're doing here with the whole jackpot thing, whatever, with her new powers or whatever they are. But I think when I think of Mary Jane, it's exactly what I think of her as someone she is a leader. She's going to take charge and she's going to do what she needs to do. And she's experienced enough in the superhero stuff that she can get by and make herself scarce when she needs to. And I love that about her. And Tom Taylor really did a great job of writing this comic and getting the characterization of Mary Jane on the money. And so, I personally think this issue is a underrated classic Spider-Man comic, to be quite honest with you, personally. And I don't think Tom Taylor's run was like the greatest, to be honest. I mean, like, I don't think it was bad. It was fine, but there are a couple of issues, and this is one of them that I think that really resonated with me, and it made me realize, like, man, Mary Jane's not realize, but helped me emphasize, I should say, that Mary Jane's a fantastic character, and we need to see more. And this cover is just chef's kiss. It's so good. Honestly too, and I want to undermine yours either, Chris. These are both great covers that embody what it's funny because the cover of this doesn't necessarily what happens. Just like this comic cover isn't necessarily what happens, but it's also the essence of the comic book too, right? Both covers.
Well, and I mean, if you wanted to analyze it even further, I mean, the cool part about the Friendly Neighborhood cover is that you're right. It's a allegorical representation of the fact that she's a hero. It's not literalized. Whereas with the action cover, it's probably what he would have preferred had actually happened, as opposed to what really did.
Yeah.
So, it's this the action cover is more like aspirational. This is the ending he wanted that he didn't get. And this one is, you never know who the real hero is.
Yeah. And sometimes the real hero will surprise you and when least expect it. And I think that's the thing, even though they may not have spider powers themselves, right? So I mean
this one is sadder. Than
yeah, I mean, that goes without saying. But I mean, if you read the,
but at the same time too, I mean, considering all of the, and I alluded to it earlier, but the misconceptions that people have about Superman, those kinds of early years stories that do have a degree of sadness or a degree of poignancy, I think that it serves Superman as a character more by showing people who do doubt that he has pathos the kinds of things that he went through when he was a young man. And that's one of the things I really like about this, just because so many people consistently misunderstand the appeal of Superman as a character as based strictly on what he can do as opposed to who he is. And this issue, I think, does a really good job of emphasizing who he is and how he came to be who he is. While also showing his awesome supporting cast in different eras. And one of the great things that makes Lois a great addition to the supporting cast, as well as just a really solid partner for someone in his unique situation.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And Zach, real quick, Zach, you're basically on. You're on the here. You're talking on here. Come on, man. Oh, Zach, I love you. It's great. Well, the good news is that you're going to be on the Spider-Man Council in a few weeks, so you can have all your stories then. Oh, that's right. I won't let you because I will gavel you, and you know what that means.
We got to get you an actual like one of those like little like inflatable. No, but like you've got the figure. But you need like one of those inflatable, like squeaking hammers that has Spider-Man on it. That would be perfect. Like, beep, beep, beep.
This is the new gavel because I don't want to ruin my other ones. And he's taller.
No, but you need one of those little inflatable hammer, like it's an actual hammer that has Spider-Man on it that squeaks when you pound it.
I mean, I don't know if I showed Zach this. Zach, is this spec or is this ultimate? I think it might be spec.
That's spec.
That's a spec.
The shape of his head seems like it's spec.
Yeah, I was gonna say the shape of the head gives it away. So anyway, this has been way more fun. And there's for us, like I think like 7 people, consistently almost. It's like that's pretty good for us, right? So
we appreciate every
one of you. Super, like, thank you. Go leave a comment right now, get off the stream or just go to the comment section and be like, this is a cool podcast or this is a cool stream. I should watch more of this, and then like the video and then all that crap. I hate this part. But the good news is that I really like this kinds of episodes, Chris. We might be able to do these a little more often. So as we wrap up here, we've got lots of exciting stuff this week, to be honest, because we've got next week we've got I don't even know if Mr. Baby forgot or maybe he didn't forget. I don't know, but we've got New 52 next week.
New 52
or 52. Super 50. I'm sorry. Yeah. Freudian slip. if you
we
will.
got to round it out, man. And then after 52, we might have to do some 1 year later. Now that the big guns are going to be back in town.
Well,
you've already read the Batman story, but there's a lot more.
Yeah, I know, but there is but no, but like which by the way, I finished reading 52 today or yesterday. I wish I like you said, I wish we could just do it, we should have done it all at once, but you know what, at the same time, I'm looking forward to talking about it because I think it ends really well. I think it's almost, I hate saying underrated a lot, but it kind of feels like this is an underappreciated story, even though it was big for its time. It feels
let me just ask you one question and we'll leave the majority of the talk for the actual episode. Do you feel like you understand the DCU more than you did when you started it?
1,000%. 1,000%. I love that for it. And it was a very entertaining way to learn about the history and all that with the DC universe because of 52. And I would say it is the best history lesson of DC continuity and like characters for the comic book medium by far, without having to read like an encyclopedia, like who's who or whatever. Right. So, I look forward to talking about that with you and Mr. Baby. And I don't think Papa Nick's going to be there, but oh well.
Oh, thank you, man. And it's a great lead into the 52 talk.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Those were fun, even though Paul and I were at each other's throats for that, but oh well.
Just for one episode. Just one. Yeah. And then after that, we're going to be talking with Joe Corallo again, coming back on, comic book writer. Super stoked to talk to him. Long Live Legion comes back. I've been catching up on the Legion stuff. That's been, I love, dude, anytime we can have Joe on, is just always a pleasure and a blast. And he's just so knowledgeable and such a good writer of the comic book medium that
kicking myself for missing him when he was in town last week.
Dude, me too. I wish next time we'll do a better job of trying to meet up with that guy because he's too cool. Because I also don't want to waste his time either. I'm like, we're just a bunch of peons. They're way cooler people to hang out than us. So I mean, whatever. So
we can be cool if we want to be. We can be.
Cool. I don't care. I don't care.
There you are.
That's the problem. That's the problem.
You got the Doom popcorn bucket. That buys you so much credibility these days.
True. I do have the Doom popcorn bucket, and it has been the gift that keeps on giving, you could say. So it's just butter is good.
No.
Bucket is better. I'll just say that butter is good. The Doom popcorn bucket, it outlasts everything. I'll just say that. Anyway, lots of fun stuff.
Or 13, the final 13.
Yeah,
it came out in 4 trades of 13 issues each, and we've done 3 of the 4, so we're gonna round it out.
Pizza time. You're just getting warmed up, just like I warm up that popcorn bucket. You know what I mean? So just saying.
You warm it up. You warm up the bucket itself.
I warm it up. You could say I warm it up.
Why?
No. I warm areas of the bucket up. So
if I'm not mistaken, 52. His job editing 52 is what got him the job editing Amazing.
It is. Yeah. It is. And then next month I'm getting that kind of all fine tuned. Hopefully, Knights Never Die will come back. Hopefully, we'll have a Spider-Man Council episode, Child Within. Very excited to talk about that comic book. So lots of good. And then I'm planning the rest of the month out. But either way, and the one I need to do and plan is the kind of infamous, or you could say fun idea of a Mad Max tie, which we talked about that. I'll remind you later. But anyway, Chris, why don't you before I tell everyone, if you haven't already, everyone, please subscribe. Please like all that videos, but leave a comment. All right, Chris, where can people find you?
At Chris Clow on various social media platforms, CHRISCLOW. And we're looking forward to bringing you the conclusion to Batman and Son in our next issue of Knights Never Die. And then after that, we will actually take a little bit of a detour to talk Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth. Book Paul hasn't read, so that's going to be fun. But it's kind of essential reading for some of the things that Grant Morrison will do later in the Batman run, particularly as it pertains to everybody's favorite Harlequin of Hate. So, be sure to check that stuff out. For those of you who are fans of the Final Frontier, Discovery Debrief, a Star Trek podcast, is going to be coming back again very soon. We are preparing for the 5th and final season of Star Trek Discovery. Our namesake show is going to be ending after this season. And then we've got a whole lot of other Star Trek to look forward to. We got season 2 of Prodigy coming. Thankfully that Netflix saved that show from the clutches of corporate cancellation. And then Star Trek Strange New World Season 3 is in production right now, and I cannot wait to see new adventures aboard the original USS Enterprise. So, it's fun stuff to look forward to.
Right on. And you can follow me on X, formerly Twitter, Herman22 with 2 N's, aka P-Thug. Follow the Comic Binge on Instagram, on X. I've been on Facebook, but I don't really care about Facebook, but that's just maybe that's a glaring thing. I don't know, but either way, we'll see you next week hopefully, and we talk about the 52 Volume 4, the last 13 issues of 52 series. And Chris, why don't you take us out, my friend?
Read more comics.